This is the award-winning Lee Pitts Live.
This portion of Lee Pitts Live is brought to you by Hodges University, celebrating 25 years of educating Southwest Florida.
Southwest Florida, we're thrilled to come to you again from Lee Memorial Health System. We're on the Gulf Coast Hospital property, and we have a man who's in the spotlight. He's the interim chief of police for the city of Fort Myers. We're delighted to welcome Dennis Eads to the show. Let's get you to bump with the cup. I know it's your first time on Lee Pitts Live. Interim chief of police. 1 minute you were a captain, and then the next minute you were the chief of police. Is that pretty much the way it went, interim chief of police?
That's pretty much exactly how it happened. 1 minute I was a captain. After a phone call, I wasn't.
Hey, do you think that you prepared for that, or just life experiences prepared you for that, or was it like a big adjustment?
It's not that big of an adjustment, except for, the adjustment is that now I'm accountable and responsible for everyone. Where before I was just accountable and responsible to people that were under me. Now everybody's under me.
Let me get this out of the way early on now. You have the interim tag. You're actually on the job training. You can prove yourself. You can become the chief of police should you desire to pursue that. That could be something you could. What is your thoughts around that right now?
I'm trying not to think about that too much right now. I'm thinking there's a lot of other things going on in the city that I got to put all my concentration on. Mm-hmm. Myself is not where it belongs.
Mm-hmm. So is that a no comment?
That's not a no comment. I got my priorities. When the priorities get into place,
Live, Chief.
When the priorities get to me, then that's when it'll be there.
All right. Okay.
It's something I'm going to consider, but
that's
it.
All right, you will consider. That's breaking news, because I've heard you do other interviews and you stay with that. You got your canned answer. As a interim chief of police for the city of Fort Myers, when you first got into that role, what were some changes that you saw that immediately need to be made?
One of the first things that I took care of, or that I thought needed to be done, was obviously there's violent crime in Fort Myers that we're dealing with, and the way the detective division was structured, some of the detectives were doing multiple tasks. Well, with these homicides and things like that, that needs to be a focus group of people where that's all they're focused on 100%. So that was one of the first things I did, was separate. There's going to end up being 6 at some point, but right now there's 5 and a supervisor, and that is their sole focus, is to deal with those situations.
You know, Chief, and I'm just going to call you Chief from here on. I already said interim people. So when I sit back and look at the high responsibility of your job and the police department's job, one of the things that escapes me, and I think it escapes a lot of citizens, is that it's one thing to arrest somebody. It's another thing to get them convicted. And that's where a lot of pieces have to come into play. Can you sort of Sesame Street that so people will understand the importance of participation, giving information if they can, helping our law enforcement out?
No, I can try. Like you mentioned, there's two different areas. There's probable cause, which gives you enough to put an individual in jail for a crime, and the state has to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. So the burden of proof is much bigger on the state than it is on us to actually put someone in jail. So we have to make sure from the ground up that all the evidence, everything is collected, put together, so it can be presented in court, presented to a jury for them to make a decision. And we have to make sure that all the training is done, everyone's prepared to do that job, and we get out and communicate and canvass and talk to potential witnesses and get as much information as we can.
Talk about ways that people can communicate with law enforcement anonymously.
Through Crime Stoppers is the absolute best way. It's 100% anonymous. I have had individuals say that I'm afraid I'll be outed on it. It's been around for a long, long time. I know of no one that's ever been put out on that. Mm-hmm. There have been people that provided their own information to it, and then of course it's no longer anonymous. But
now you and our lives have changed substantially over the years. We met maybe 20, 25 years ago when I first arrived here in Southwest Florida. You were a security guard at the bank where I worked. Yep. You said you and I used to talk all the time. I couldn't remember because you had hair back then. Yeah. Of course, I had hair back then. But to go from being a security guard to being a chief of police, did you envision that your career path would take you in that way?
Well, way back then, I think I was 21, 22 years old. I was a police officer.
Right.
Of Fort Myers, working the security there at the bank. And no, my next thought was maybe next week. So okay. I didn't go a whole long
yeah,
beyond that.
What's next week? Talk about the morale right now in the Fort Myers Police Department when you canvass your staff. What's the morale like right now?
I think it's picking up. I think it's good. We're right in the middle of I just came here from contract talks with the city, and we're going to have a meeting with the union and board next week, and that'll probably help morale a little bit more to get a open contract behind us. But it's picking up.
One of the things I hear you say and I read, that community policing, you want to get more involved with the community. How does that look? Describe community policing.
Well, there's a textbook version, which everyone reads in books, and then there's what I'm talking about, which some of it's kind of the same. Mine is, you're out in a community, and regardless of what community it is, you stop, you talk, you see individuals, you see kids, you stop and talk to them. Find out who they are, find out what they're doing, let them know who you are, because you're the person they got to depend on. And in many cases, you may have to depend on them as well.
When there was some talk about a gun buyback program, I don't know where that is today. Bring us up to speed on, did that ever come to reality? What's your thoughts about the gun buyback program?
Well, we haven't done one yet. I collected information. We did one years past. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good documentation on how that went, and I don't remember. But several other counties in the state do them. Orange County, Tampa PD does them. So we got their information on how they do it. So we're putting it together for consideration. It hasn't happened yet. It may happen. I've talked to a couple people about using their location to do it. But so far it's still in the thought process. My personal opinion on if it's a tool that will work, will it get guns? Yes, I'm sure people will bring and get guns. Or is it the guns that we want? No.
What's it called, ZombieCom?
ZombieCom. Yes, sir.
Of course, by the time we taped this show, ZombieCom would have happened. We had a shooting there, a killing there that took place. At the time that people are viewing this, we don't have all the details in, but sort of tell us some of the challenges when we have those large crowds downtown and how law enforcement plays and what role you guys play in there. You stationed undercover, you have undercover police officers walking amongst the crowd. Just kind of take us behind the scenes of how you protect in those situations.
At that particular event, there was probably somewhere in the neighborhood between 15 and 20,000 participants, dressed in various costumes, face paint, stilts, you name it, whatever you want to see. There was 30 police officers, uniformed police officers. There were individuals in undercover capacities, not necessarily from our police department, but from other agencies. And there was a number of private security guards that were supposed to be in control of the perimeter and different things to do with the actual, they were hired by the ZombieCon people. There's probably around 40 plus, not exactly sure.
A situation like that, where you have a shooting with all of those people, and some people have fake guns, all types of things in their hands, all kinds of makeup on. Is that virtually impossible to patrol? I mean, to me, it seemed like an impossible thing that anything can happen at any given time. You just have to do your best.
Well, I won't say it's impossible. It makes it a little more difficult because there was a lot of people not in makeup as well, and costume. And the guns, if it's borderline or it looks like it could be a real gun or it's something that you can't tell, then the officer would ask them to leave with it or remove it. But if it was something that was an obvious toy, then it wasn't really addressed. We've dealt with a person down here last year had a crossbow, real crossbow with an arrow in it, ready to shoot, and they were removed. The person had a real samurai sword. So yeah, there's a lot of looks. There's a lot of looking to do, and it's not where somebody can just sit somewhere and just not pay attention.
When we have the governor of the state, Mike Scott, to come down to Fort Myers, to be a part of meetings with the mayor, Randy Henderson, Sheriff Mike Scott, and getting the Lee County Sheriff Department to work in conjunction with the Fort Myers Police Department. We have all of that going on. What should the community take from that? What message is that sending?
Well, we're working together to resolve this and get to the bottom of it. And the partnership between the sheriff and I started before any of that. We had discussions about that before. And as soon as not long after I got sworn in, we had a little meal together and discussed, and we already had laid out that we wanted to do something together as the two agencies to show unity and partnership.
Okay. So prior to that, the Lee County Sheriff Department and the Fort Myers Police Department weren't working together?
I want to say it wasn't probably as good as it could have been, or should have been.
Okay. What should come out of that? Were they at ZombieCom? Was the Sheriff Department at ZombieCom?
Oh, no, sir. Not until afterwards. After the event, some of the deputies came down that are working with our officers right now in the task force. They came down to help clear the streets. But at the beginning of it, no, we had, like I said, 30 of our officers there in supervision.
Okay, when we look up 10 years from now, no, 5 years from now, will the Fort Myers Police Department, as it exists now, as a separate entity from the Lee County Sheriff Department, will it continue to exist as a separate entity with its own chief, its own everything, or will it be blended into the Lee County Sheriff Department?
I think it definitely will still exist as it is, as its own agency, and it should be.
Okay. I want you to make the case for me. Why do we need that? Why does Fort Myers need its own police department?
Because it's a smaller place. It's a smaller part of the county. It's a smaller place. It's its own entity, and we're there, and we need to be a part of it. And if someone calls, they get a response. They get an immediate response as soon as possible. Where any other where that may not be guaranteed.
Okay, so it needs to be targeted focus. Now, Dunbar, East Fort Myers, those types of zip codes right there, those I've heard from time to time, those are the hot spots. Tell us what that means.
Oh, it depends on who's saying that. It depends on if it's gun violence or different things such as that. It depends on the hot spot you're looking for. If it's burglaries, robberies such as that, maybe off Palm Beach, there may be a few more robberies than there are in other places in the city. There may be more gun violence, sometimes occasionally in what you call Dunbar area, than there is in other parts of the city. But if you look at it from the whole focus, that's not necessarily always true. Usually what the parameters are laid out as Dunbar are the crime rate is probably much lower than you would actually believe. I didn't bring the stats with me because I didn't know you'd want them.
Don't need them.
But in that area, the actual overall crime rate is probably one of the lower districts in the city.
What have you learned that is a misconception about, that's the final question, what is the misconception about Dunbar that by you being in the capacity that you are, that you have noticed that you can share with us?
Just that all the violence takes place in Dunbar. I mean, that's one of them where it's all drug-related type incidents. It's just really not. A lot of them are not drug-related. A lot of it is about little groups. I'm going to call them gangs, since we never did before, because that's what they are. They'll do rap videos about each other, disrespecting each other. And if you see one pop up on YouTube, you're pretty much guaranteed very shortly there's going to be a shooting.
Really? Okay, and you have people who are monitoring the social media.
We're doing the best we can to keep up on that and do what we can.
Okay,
Yes,
Chief, we wish you all the luck. Anything Lee Pitts Live can do to help, we're going to be there to help out. We know you got a substantial job there. You're in law enforcement, and we know that there are some great police officers out there doing what they can to protect and serve. Keep up the good work, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, stay right there. As the saying goes on this particular show, for those who say it can't be done, they're usually interrupted by those like the interim chief, Eads, and all the people at the Fort Myers Police Department who are doing it. When we come back, we'll talk about the Haitian Democratic Club right here on Lee Pitts Live.